John McMullen is here, and of course the Eagles have the day off, so slow stuff with the Eagles. But we do have some Eagles questions from some listeners today. We solicited some questions from our listeners today for John, and we'll ask him some of those questions, plus some NFL spring storylines that might have some interest. I think the big thing with the spring, as you start to get ready for training camp, is, John, when you basically shut your eyes and blink, we'll be there. I mean, it's June 1 now. These teams are going to be at training camp before we know it.
Yeah, it's the NFL. One thing they've done, and I think a large part of the popularity of this league has been the way they set up the calendar and the fact that there's always something going on. And you really roll right from the Super Bowl to the Senior Bowl to the Combine to the draft to OTAs, mini camp, training camp. So they, for all the criticism of the NFL that they get at times, one thing they've been tremendous at is staying on the front page of the papers. They're always number one because there's always something going on.
John, we got the first round of OTAs done. We'll have the second round coming up here. So what are some of the biggest questions or concerns entering the training camps? We know we have mini camps next week and another round of OTAs, but what are some things that still need to be fixed or answered if you're Howie Roseman and Joe Douglas?
Well, there's not much you can do from a personnel standpoint. You're where you are at this point. Your off-season roster is filled. The Eagles are at 89 out of 90 after cutting Stephen Daniels yesterday, so they could add a player, but it certainly wouldn't be expected to be a main contributor to the team. So this is what you have. This is the lot you've been dealt. They've done their work, Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas. Now it's about coaching the players. Now it's in Doug Peterson's hands in the coaching staff. And we all know there's been significant improvements at certain positions. There's still concern at others. If you're looking for the biggest concerns, it starts with cornerback, and then I think you have to look at running back still. They added LeGarrette Blount, and that was certainly a big upgrade, but you have some concern because if you look at his history and you just look at what Doug Peterson has shown us in his first year as a head coach, you have a running back who doesn't catch the football. And you have a head coach who doesn't really like to run the football. So I'm not sure how well he fits into what Doug Peterson perceives as his offense.
We got some listener questions for John today, and piggybacking off that, Gene says his biggest concern is the defense as a whole. There are so many questions with that unit. Says he considers himself a realistic Eagles fan. They've been his favorite team since he went to his first game in 1964, but says, I feel better about the Birds, but wouldn't surprise me one bit if they were kind of a 9-7, 8-8 ball club because of the defense. So is the biggest, you said defense, but he says the unit as a whole.
Well, I agree with part of that. I mean, there's some concerns. The weakest position on this team, as I mentioned, is cornerback. But then again, on the other side of the coin, you look at the best football players on this team, and they're generally on the defensive side of the football. Fletcher Cox, Jordan Hicks, Malcolm Jenkins. You can argue there's a difference maker at every level on this defense, and you can even throw Brandon Graham into that mix. But there is little depth. So if there is an injury here or there, then you have a real concern. But the Eagles have significant talent on the defensive side, at least among the starters, and you also have a very highly regarded defensive coordinator. So I think it all really boils down to two things. Is the pass rush going to be improved? And if it isn't, you're going to have some serious problems because I don't think the cornerbacks are going to hold up.
Michael says that he's in the middle. The offense he thinks is going to be better with the new wide receivers. But Wentz's mechanics, he says, I hope they improve. If so, then he'll have a good season. Where do you stand on the Wentz's mechanics thing? We know that there was that article last week, and Peterson seemed to kind of downplay it a little bit, but he certainly needed to tinker with them and fix them, right? We would all agree with that. He had some that was something the Eagles wanted to see him fix.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much a storyline since the day they drafted him. The Eagles understood he had some mechanical issues, as most young quarterbacks do, and they need to be improved. It's a work in progress. They got progressively worse, I think, as the season wore on last year, because, once you get into regular season mode, in the NFL, there's not a lot of room to kind of step back and fix issues like that. That's what the off season is for. And Carson has done it. He's done it on his own by going out with Tom House and trying to get some coaching when he's not allowed to work with the Eagles to fix those mechanics. And obviously the Eagles are constantly working on it. But it is still a work in progress. I think if you watch it practice, for instance, obviously the backup is Nick Foles, who has a little more experience. You can tell he's better fundamentally, Nick Foles. And so Carson still has a way to go. But that doesn't mean it's time to give up on it and say it's never going to improve. He's only in the second season, and I think he will start improving incrementally. But until he gets to where the Eagles want him, yeah, you're going to have hiccups at times.
We got another question regarding the wide receivers, and one is saying beyond the defense, Carson needs weapons. The wide receivers were a joke. You've seen a little bit of the new wide receivers. Not, they're not training camp, they're not wearing equipment yet, pads or anything, but you already see a noticeable upgrade and difference at the wide receiver core.
Oh, yeah, vast improvement. You have professional receivers now. I mean, that's the bottom line. We can argue how much Torrey Smith is going to help, but he certainly knows how to play the position. He knows what to do at the NFL level. Alshon Jeffery, if he's healthy, he's a legitimate top 10 or top 15 receiver in this league. So they're vastly improved. And then you sort of have the domino effect of having those guys on the field are only going to make Jordan Matthews better, who's ill-suited to be a number one receiver. But as a number three receiver, that's pretty darn good. So as a whole, that's probably the most improved group or unit on this football team. So there's no doubt there's going to be significant improvement. We'll have to wait and see how much improvement, but I think from Jeffrey's standpoint, the only thing you have to worry about is health. If he's on the field, he's going to produce. And Matthews is going to be a solid slot receiver. We'll see what Torrey Smith can give him, but it's certainly going to be more than they got last year from that position.
I'm interested in Smith, in your opinion on Smith. I think he's going to be closer to the Baltimore guy and really be an asset to this offense.
Well, that's the hope. Right. I mean, it wasn't good.
Are they looking at him though? Are they looking at him though as more as a one-trick pony, or do you think they want to, have him more in, the 55, 60 catch range, or is he going to be more in that 35 to 45 range where he's just catching bombs all the time?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I think to a certain degree they do consider him a one-catch, one-trick pony. He's going to be the speed guy, but they expect him to catch about 50 balls because he's going to be out there. And maybe it comes down to a hitch or a bubble screen or going deep. But he's certainly not a well-rounded receiver. He's not going to remind you of Marvin Harrison running the route tree perfectly. He's not that guy. But what he is, and what he has always been in the NFL, is somebody who can stretch the field. The Eagles desperately needed that last season. They didn't have it, and he fits a role. I think as far as the volume goes, that's going to be Alshon and Jordan Matthews.
John McMullen with us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN as we are live out at the ShopRite LBJ Classic. Now, you just had some good things to say about Alshon Jeffery, John. What's a realistic hope for Alshon Jeffery since he is on that prove-it deal? Will he finally fulfill that number one wide receiver numbers that this team has lacked, I guess, since maybe Jeremy Maclin a few years ago? Do you think he'll at least be better than Maclin?
Yeah, I think he's a better receiver than Jeremy Maclin. Again, he has to stay healthy. He's had trouble staying on the field. When he has been on the field, he's been able to produce at a high level. As far as, his length and his ability to go after the football, he's amongst the best 2 or 3 receivers in the entire NFL as far as 50-50 balls go. And that is, at times, the best friend of any quarterback, because if a guy isn't open and you can feel the confidence to throw him the football and understand he's going to go get it, and if he can't get it, he's going to break it up, that gives the quarterback that much more confidence. I don't think there's any questions about Alshon Jeffery's talent or ability to perform. The only questions with him are can he stay on the football field?
Previewing the Eagles as they've gone through 2 rounds of OTAs and still have more OTAs and training camps to go. We have more questions for you, John, from some of our listeners. Tim Kelly wants to know, just having competent wide receivers, and with Wentz having better knowledge maybe of the offense and the rookie year behind him, does that mean the offense will improve? Is it that simple?
Yeah, it is that simple. It is going to be improved because, as I said, you had a rookie quarterback last season who, remember, Sam Bradford got traded 11 days before the start of the 8 days. 8 days before the start of the regular season. So Carson Wentz didn't prepare as a starter. He's a rookie on top of that, and on top of that, he had the worst, and I mean 32 out of 32. The worst receiving group in the NFL. That's a tough hill to climb, and the Eagles managed to win 7 games with all that against them. Now they have a proven guy in Alshon Jeffery. They have a veteran guy who's won a Super Bowl in Torrey Smith. Jordan Matthews, as I said, when you start knocking him down and he's in the position more suited for him, and the fact that he's not the guy, he's just another guy. And then we haven't even talked about Zach Ertz, who caught 80 passes last year. So they should be significantly improved offensively, and they're going to be expected to be significantly improved. People should expect them to be, and that's fair. Now, whether that turns into more wins and efficacy that way, we'll have to see, because they face a very difficult schedule and a very difficult division. I said with Mike earlier in the week, theoretically, they could win 7 games again and be a much better football team.
Hey, here's another question that Tim asked, and this is an interesting this is the second part of the question that PT asked you, but he asked, if the offense improves, does that help the defense improve as well by staying off the field longer? The old Chip Kelly theory. Well, if the offense is not going off the field so fast, that should help the defense. It didn't seem to really come into fruition last year. Defense still wasn't very good. We thought, well, they're just going to be a better defense. They have to be, because they're not going to be on the field as much. But I don't know that you can say that the defense was significantly upgraded last year.
Well, I think they were a lot better than they were in the Chip Kelly era, and part of it was for the fact they weren't playing 18 games, and they got to play 16 like everybody else. But the Eagles were a very good ball control team last year, which surprises a lot of people as far as time of possession, because they threw it so much. Partially I kind of agree with Chip. I think he took it to a ludicrous degree. I think at times time of possession is overrated. But, if you can run the football and run it well, it's helpful. It's just common sense. If you have a lead with 4 minutes left in the game and you got a guy like LeGarrette Blount that can move the chains, well, that's good for your football team, and that will certainly help your defense. But I have to see Doug Peterson want to run the football because we haven't seen that yet. He certainly didn't seem to enjoy running it last year, but you can also say he didn't feel comfortable in the running backs he had, and I think that's fair as well. So I think there's still questions to be answered as far as what type of coach Doug Peterson's going to be.
One question from Mike DeGaza. He mentioned the offense, and this is something that I don't think just sitting here you realize, but they were 22nd or 23rd in total offense last year. How much better offensively are they going to be? You realize how bad they were, but the running game, adding that running game should help them being a bottom half offense and bring them more. I mean, are they closer to a top 10 offense now?
Well, I'm not going to say top 10. I still think there's, I still don't think if you're looking at that receiving group for a whole, again, you're coming up from 32. I can't say that enough. You're dead last coming into this season. You significantly improved at that particular position. It's not like you're top 10, though. When you look at receivers and receiving groups around the league, they're probably still in the 20s as far as talent goes from the wide receiver standpoint. Same thing with running back. Yeah, you've improved with LeGarrette Blount, but you're not getting, I hate to say it, you're not getting 18 touchdowns from LeGarrette Blount. There's a difference playing with Tom Brady and the New England Patriots and coming to the Philadelphia Eagles. He's not going to be that effective here. Is he better than what they had last season? Yes. But it's still, if you look at the running backs units around the league, the Eagles are still not near the top half, never mind the top 10. So there's still plenty of room for improvement.
John, we've been talking a lot about the offense here, but I do want to ask you a little bit about the defense because in OTAs, I know Jim Schwartz loves the OTAs, but I ask you, how much can you really improve as a defense when there are no pads, there's no hitting? Remember that whole thing where the tackle to the ground thing, just to throw a little Chip Kelly in there for you to make you smile. But how much can you really improve as a defense in the OTAs?
No, I don't think you can improve much. The OTAs are about teaching the younger guys, and that's what Jim likes. He's a teacher, and he likes to teach. He'll also be the first one to tell you he can't tell anything until the pads go on as far as who's going to be effective. And everybody understands that. OTAs they can be helpful in sort of evaluating the skill position guys because they can do some things. But anybody who tells you an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman are looking good or doing things, they don't have pads on. They can't hit each other. It's not meaningful. And understands that, and Jim talks about it all the time, actually.
Well, they signed Derek Barnett the other day, and they you're right. They can't see the guys get better. Thank you, by the way, sir.
Thank you.
We're getting dropped off some things here from McGettigan's 19th hole, which was very nice. But you can't improve in terms of because you're not wearing the pads and all that kind of good stuff. However, I think you can see that the Eagles are excited about Derek Barnett. I mean, obviously they're always going to be excited about the first-round pick. But at this point, when Marcus Smith was here, I think we could already say, like, wow, he looked like he was small. People were already questioning, like, he doesn't look like he's big enough. You remember that?
Yeah, I do. And remember, Marcus was a different type of guy because most draft analysts had him rated as a second-round pick, and it seemed like a reach from that standpoint where the Eagles took him. So he had that against him. Then they were also in a different defense. They were running the 3-4 with Chip Kelly, and so they were looking for smaller guys on the edge to play outside linebacker. So all of that kind of mixed into it. And Barnett's the 14th overall pick. He broke Reggie White's record in college. He's a natural pass rusher. He's got the great motor. So there's a lot of differences. But there's also been people who've questioned his size. He's not the biggest guy in the world. So I think he still needs to add a little bit of weight to his frame, and I think he will. But you're right. I mean, the Eagles are very excited about him, but they're not excited because of what he's done in the OTAs. They're excited because of what they've seen on film when he was at Tennessee, and because he's such a hard worker. That's what they constantly talk about. He's got the motor all great defensive linemen have.
Here's the last one from Matt we'll get to today. He says the offense should be improved. They won 7 games last year with no wide receivers. There's no reason they don't add to that total this year. The cornerback is still an obvious question mark, but the biggest question mark is the head coach. Is that the biggest question mark? Is the head coach the biggest question mark entering training camp?
I don't think he's the biggest, but he's a question mark. I just, talked about what kind of coach is Doug Peterson. Is he going to be like Andy Reid light, and is he going to always default to throwing the football no matter what? You think about having a rookie quarterback throwing the rock over 600 times. And remember, we talked earlier in the conversation, a rookie quarterback who wasn't supposed to play from the original planning, and all of a sudden he's forced into action once the trade is made, and he throws it over 600 times. Now, in theory,
what's that show on the NFL Network? What's that show on the NFL Network, John? Hey, rookie, don't throw the ball 600 times.
Yeah, because the common sense solution and that type, you want to protect the guy. You want to sort of scale things back. You want to throw it 20 times a game and have this great running attack and sort of protect him. Now, again, as I point out, the Eagles didn't have the type of running backs to do that. So that part of it I get, but I still can't get over how much Doug Peterson had Carson Wentz dropping back last season.
All right. Thanks to the people who sent questions in for John today. We'll try to do this a couple more times before training camp gets here as OTAs continue next week. The mini camp, John will be there at the NovaCare Center. Follow John on Twitter at JF McMullen and check out his national coverage at FanRag Sports NFL and always online at 973ESPN.com. John, you have a good weekend, my friend.
All right, you too, guys. Enjoy the golf.